The Conversation Skills for Introverts Blueprint. Overcome social anxiety, master small talk, and build meaningful connections with powerful communication and social skills by Owen Hartley. Introduction. The clock on the wall of the London hotel room ticked toward 8. In exactly 60 minutes, the doors to the ballroom would open. For most young women in 1902, this was the moment they had dreamed of for years. It was their debut, the night they would step into society and show the world who they were. But for Eleanor Roosevelt, the ticking sound felt like a countdown to a disaster. She stood in front of the tall mirror, pulling at the fabric of her expensive dress. She felt like a giant in a world made for small, dainty people. She was tall, awkward, and convinced that she had nothing interesting to say. To Eleanor, a party wasn't a celebration. It was a test she was guaranteed to fail. She could already imagine the whispers. She could feel the heavy silence that would follow if she tried to join a group of people chatting by the punch bowl. Her throat felt tight. Her palms were damp. She wanted to crawl into the library and hide behind a book until the sun came up. She believed she was born with a deathly shyness that could never be cured. She felt like a spectator in her own life, watching other people laugh and connect while she stayed trapped behind a glass wall. This feeling of being invisible is a weight that many of us carry every single day. You might feel it when you walk into a crowded break room at work. You might feel it when a neighbor waves at you from across the street and your mind suddenly goes blank. It is the introvert's paradox. You have a world of deep thoughts, brilliant ideas, and a kind heart, but you feel like you lack the blueprint everyone else was given at birth, the invisible curse. The world often feels like it was built by people who love to hear themselves talk. From the loud music in coffee shops to the open-plan offices where everyone shouts over their monitors, the extrovert ideal is everywhere. If you aren't the loudest person in the room, people assume you have nothing to say. If you don't jump into a conversation within the first 3 seconds, the window closes and the group moves on without you. This creates a cycle of frustration. You stay quiet because you don't want to say something stupid or boring. Because you stay quiet, people stop asking for your opinion. Because they stop asking, you feel even more like an outsider. Eventually, you start to believe that your introversion is a flaw that needs to be fixed. You try to act extroverted, but it feels like wearing a heavy mask. It drains your energy until you have nothing left for the people you actually care about. You aren't alone in this. Millions of people feel the same small talk dread. They want to skip the talk about the weather and the weekend and get straight to the things that matter. They want to contribute their best ideas in meetings instead of thinking of the perfect response 10 minutes after the meeting ends. Most of all, they want to be valued for who they are, not for how loud they can shout. The truth is, your introversion isn't a broken version of an extrovert. It is a completely different way of processing the world. While others are busy talking, you are busy observing. While others are skimming the surface, you are looking for depth. These are not weaknesses. They are the exact tools you need to become a connected communicator. The science of the quiet brain. For a long time, people thought shyness and introversion were the same thing. They aren't. Shyness is the fear of social judgment. Introversion is simply how you respond to energy and stimulation. In the late 1990s and early 2000s, scientists began to look inside the brain to see why some people love parties while others prefer a quiet night with a book. They found a fascinating difference in how we handle brain chemicals. Extroverts are very sensitive to dopamine. This is the chemical that makes us feel high when we take risks or meet new people. Their brains are wired to seek out big, loud, fast-paced rewards. Introverts, on the other hand, prefer a different chemical called acetylcholine. This chemical is linked to the inner world. It rewards us for thinking deeply, focusing on a single task, and having meaningful one-on-one conversations. This explains why your social battery drains so quickly. When you are in a loud, crowded room, your brain is being flooded with dopamine-seeking signals that you aren't wired to handle for long. It's like trying to run a laptop on a car battery. Works for a while, but it's not efficient, and eventually the screen goes dark. There's also a biological reason for that blank mind feeling. Studies show that introverts have longer neural pathways for processing words. When someone asks you a question, your brain doesn't just look for a quick answer. It travels through the parts of your brain responsible for long-term memory and deep feelings. You aren't slow, you are thorough. But in a fast-paced conversation, that thoroughness feels like a delay. This book is about bridging that gap. It is about taking the way your brain naturally works and building a system that allows you to shine without burning out. Meeting Alara to see how this works in the real world, we need to look at Alara Vance. Alara is 32 years old and lives in Austin, Texas. She is a senior software engineer at a mid-sized tech company. If you saw her code, you would see a work of art. She is brilliant, logical, and has a dry sense of humor that her few close friends adore. But at work, Alara is the invisible employee. Right now, Alara is standing in the doorway of a local bar where her company is holding a mixer. The room is filled with the smell of expensive appetizers and the roar of 50 people talking at once. Her boss, Marcus, is in the center of a circle, laughing loudly at someone's joke. Alara's chest feels tight. She grips her purse strap so hard her knuckles turn white. She knows she should circulate. She knows she should talk to the VPs and make connections if she ever wants to be promoted to a leadership role. But every time she thinks about walking up to a group, her mind provides a list of everything that could go wrong. What if I interrupt them? What if they look at me and realize I don't belong here? What if they ask me what I do for fun and I can't remember a single hobby? She walks to the snack table and picks up a sparkling water. She stares at the label like it's the most interesting thing in the world. She sees Marcus look her way. He smiles and starts to wave her over. Alara feels a surge of literal panic. Instead of walking toward him, she turns on her heel and heads for the bathroom. She sits on the closed lid of a toilet stall and checks her phone. Her battery is at 12%. She realizes her own internal battery is at about 2%. She has been at the event for 10 minutes and she is already done. Alara believes she is a failure. She thinks that to be successful, she has to fix herself. She thinks she needs to become a loud, charismatic version of herself that doesn't actually exist. She doesn't realize that she is actually sitting on a gold mine of quiet power. She just doesn't have the map to find it yet. The promise of the blueprint. The goal of this book is to give you that map. You are not going to learn how to fake it until you make it. You are not going to learn how to be the life of the party. That sounds exhausting, and frankly, the world has enough life of the party types. Instead, you are going to learn how to be a connected communicator. By the time you reach the final page, you will be able to use your natural listening cues to make people feel seen and heard, which builds more trust than talking ever could. Master the hook and pivot to move small talk from boring weather reports to meaningful topics that you actually enjoy. Manage your social battery so you can attend events, make an impact, and leave feeling satisfied rather than shattered. Speak up in high-pressure meetings using the power of the pause, making your ideas the most respected ones in the room. Build an inner circle of friends and mentors who value your depth and your quiet strength. This isn't just theory. This is a blueprint based on the lives of people who changed the world without ever being the loudest person in the room. We will look at how Eleanor Roosevelt went from a girl hiding in a library to a woman who chaired the United Nations' most important committees. She never lost her shyness, but she learned to use it as a bridge to other people. We will follow Charles Darwin, a man so introverted that he spent decades in a quiet country house, using letters and deep observation to rewrite the history of life on Earth. He will show us how to engineer a social life that works for our brains. We will study Rosa Parks, who proved that a quiet, immovable presence could be more powerful than 1,000 shouts. She will teach us about the body language of conviction, the roadmap ahead. We are going to take this journey one step at a time. We will start by changing how you see yourself. We will look at the biology of your quiet power and how to stop the inner critic that replays every social mistake like a horror movie. Next, we will tackle the battlefield of daily life. You will learn specific, 5th grade simple techniques for the break room, the coffee shop, and the office meeting. We will look at nonverbal communication, the way you stand, the way you look at people, and the way you use silence to command respect without saying a word. Then we will move into the gateway of small talk. You will learn how to build the bridge of curiosities, a simple framework that turns a "hi, how are you?" into a real connection. We will cover high-stakes networking and how to handle fights or difficult people using the soft, hard, soft model. Finally, we will look at how to build a life of deep, meaningful bonds. You will learn how to transition from an acquaintance to a true friend and how to host social gatherings that don't drain your battery. Alara is still in that bathroom stall in Austin, looking at her phone. She thinks her story for the night is over. She thinks she's going to go home, eat cereal, and feel bad about herself. But Alara is about to discover that her social battery isn't a limitation, it's a tool for selective, high-quality engagement. She is about to learn that she doesn't need to change who she is. She just needs to change her strategy. The ticking clock doesn't have to be a threat. It can be a signal that your time to shine is coming. You don't have to scream to be heard. You don't have to be a social spectator anymore. The blueprint is ready. The bridge is waiting to be built. Let's begin. Chapter 1: Mastering the Quiet Power. Marie Souvestre was a woman who did not believe in small goals. In the late 1800s, she ran a school called a Lenswood outside of London. She was sharp, wise, and had a way of looking at a person that made them feel like they were the only thing that mattered in the room. Most schools at the time wanted young women to be social butterflies. They taught them how to giggle at parties, how to pour tea, and how to make enough noise to be noticed by a husband. Marie hated that. She looked for the girls who sat in the back. She looked for the ones who watched more than they spoke. One day, a tall, awkward girl arrived at her door. This girl felt like a failure because she was deathly shy. She felt like she was a puzzle with a missing piece. That girl was Eleanor Roosevelt. Most people told Eleanor she needed to come out of her shell. They told her she needed to be louder. But Marie Souvestre sat her down and taught her a lesson that changed history. She didn't tell Eleanor to be loud. She told her that her sensibility, her ability to feel things deeply and think before speaking, was a superpower. Marie taught her that the world is full of people who talk just to hear themselves. The person who listens observes and then speaks with purpose is the one who actually leads. Marie was the first person to show Eleanor that being an introvert wasn't a cage. It was a toolkit. She didn't need to fix her shyness, she needed to master it. This was the birth of a mindset that would eventually lead Eleanor to the White House and the United Nations. She learned that power doesn't come from how much space you take up in a room. It comes from the quality of what you bring to it. The myth of the broken compass. For a long time, we have been told a lie. The lie says that if you aren't the loudest person in the room, you are somehow broken. We see the person at the party who is high-fiving everyone and think, I should be more like that. We see the manager who interrupts everyone and think, that's what confidence looks like. This creates a broken compass feeling. You try to follow the path of the loud person, but it feels wrong. It makes you tired. It makes you feel like an imposter. People believe this myth because our culture rewards the first responder. We reward the person who speaks first, even if they haven't thought about what they are saying. We mistake volume for value, but if you look at the most important changes in history, they didn't usually start with a shout. They started with a quiet observation. The truth is that introversion is not a personality flaw. It is a biological setting. Inside your brain, there are chemicals that control how you feel about the world. Extroverts have a brain that is very sensitive to dopamine. Dopamine is like a reward chemical. When an extrovert is in a loud, busy room, their brain gets a huge hit of dopamine. It feels like a drug. They want more. Introverts are different. Our brains prefer a chemical called acetylcholine. This chemical is linked to the rest and digest part of our system. It makes us feel good when we are thinking deeply, solving a problem, or having a one-on-one talk. When we get too much dopamine, like at a loud office party, it doesn't feel like a reward. It feels like a headache. It feels like our social battery is being drained by a giant vacuum. When you try to act like an extrovert, you are trying to run your car on the wrong kind of fuel. You might get down the road for a mile or two, but eventually, the engine is going to smoke and quit. Mastering quiet power means realizing that you don't need to change your fuel. You just need to change the way you drive. The man in the country house in 1839, a man named Charles Darwin, was becoming a star. He had just spent 5 years traveling the world on a ship called the Beagle. He had seen giant tortoises and strange birds. He had boxes of fossils and notebooks full of ideas. Everyone in London wanted to talk to him. They wanted him to come to dinner parties. They wanted him to give speeches at big scientific meetings. London was the center of the world, and Darwin was right in the middle of it, but Darwin was miserable. Every time he went to a party, he felt sick. His stomach would hurt. He couldn't sleep. The noise of the horse-drawn carriages and the constant chatter of the city made his brain feel like it was vibrating. He felt like he was performing a version of himself that was exhausting. He was a brilliant thinker, but he was a social spectator who felt like an outsider in the very city that was cheering for him. He realized a hard truth. If he stayed in London and tried to be the social scientist everyone expected, he would never finish his work. He would spend all his energy on small talk and have none left for the big questions of life. Darwin did something that seemed like professional suicide. He left London. He moved to a place called Down House in the quiet countryside of Kent. He didn't go there to hide. He went there to build a controlled social environment. He realized that his introversion wasn't a weakness that needed fixing, it was a requirement for his genius. Darwin turned his life into a machine for deep thinking. He created a path behind his house called the Sandwalk. Every morning and afternoon, he would walk this path in total silence. This was his recharge time. He would think about how species changed over millions of years. He wasn't being bored, he was doing the deepest work a human could do. But Darwin didn't stop talking to the world. He just changed how he talked. He became a master of letters. He wrote thousands of them. He reached out to gardeners, pigeon breeders, and scientists all over the globe. By writing instead of talking, he could take his time. He could think about every word. He used the power of the pause. If someone asked him a hard question, he didn't have to answer in 2 seconds at a dinner table. He could wait 3 weeks, think it through, and send a perfect response. Darwin proved that you don't have to be in the room to change the room. He used his quiet strength to build a network that was stronger than any social club in London. While the loud scientists were busy arguing at parties, Darwin was quietly gathering the evidence that would change how we understand life itself. Sunday night in Austin, Alara Vance sat at her small kitchen table in Austin, Texas. Outside, the humid night air was thick, but inside, her apartment was cool and quiet. Her greyhound, Gatsby, was curled up on the rug, his long legs tucked in like a folded lawn chair. Alara had a notebook open. On the left side of the page, she had written, "The mixer." She thought back to the tech event she had gone to 2 nights ago. She remembered the feeling of the heavy glass of sparkling water in her hand. She remembered how her heart felt like a trapped bird in her chest when her boss, Marcus, had looked her way. She had left early, feeling like she had failed a test. But then she looked at the book she had been reading about Charles Darwin. She began to write on the right side of the page, social engineering. As a software engineer, Alara knew how to fix a bug in a piece of code. If a program was crashing because it was using too much memory, she didn't yell at the computer. She looked at the architecture. She looked for the leaks. "I'm not broken," she whispered to Gatsby. "I'm just poorly optimized." She realized that the open plan office where she worked was like the London Darwin had fled. It was a constant drain on her social battery. Every time someone walked by her desk and asked, "How's it going?" a little bit of her energy leaked out. By the time the important meetings happened in the afternoon, her battery was at 5%. No wonder she couldn't think of anything to say. Alara didn't need to become a people person. She needed to be a strategy person. She started to map out her energy. She realized that she was most creative in the morning. She decided that from 8:00 a.m. to 10:00 a.m., she would wear noise-canceling headphones, a signal that her port was closed. This would save her charge for the meetings later in the day. She also realized she was a pattern seeker. In meetings, she usually stayed quiet because she was waiting to see how all the ideas fit together. She used to think this was a sign of being slow. Now, looking at Darwin's life, she realized it was her greatest asset. She wasn't slow, she was deep. She made a plan. In the next meeting, she wouldn't try to be the first to speak. She would let everyone else scramble to talk. She would listen for the gaps. She would wait for the moment when the noise died down, and then she would offer the one piece of logic that connected everything. For the first time in years, the invisible employee felt like she had a secret map. She wasn't going to fix her introversion. She was going to use it to win. The advantage of the quiet leader is easy to think that to lead, you must be a commander. We think of generals giving loud speeches on battlefields, but modern science shows us something different. A famous study by Adam Grant at the University of Pennsylvania looked at how different types of bosses get results. Most people assume that extroverted bosses are always better, but the study found something surprising. If a team is passive, meaning the employees just wait to be told what to do, then an extroverted boss works well. They provide the energy the team lacks. However, if a team is proactive, meaning the employees are smart, have their own ideas, and want to take initiative, extroverted bosses actually get worse results. Why? Because extroverted bosses often talk over their people. They get so excited about their own ideas that they don't listen to the brilliant suggestions coming from the team. The employees eventually stop trying. They think, "Why bother? He's just going to do what he wants anyway." Introverted bosses, on the other hand, are the secret weapon of high-performing teams. Because an introverted leader is a natural listener, they create a space where proactive employees can shine. They don't feel the need to own the spotlight. They listen to the idea, process it deeply, and give the employee the green light to run with it. This creates a culture of trust and high performance that loud leaders often crush without even realizing it. This is the introvert advantage. Deep listening, you hear what isn't being said. You notice the tone of a person's voice or the way they hesitate before agreeing. Pattern recognition. Because you aren't busy talking, your brain is free to connect dots that others miss. Measured response. You don't say things you regret as often because your brain has a buffer between the thought and the word. In a world that is getting louder and more distracted, these 3 skills are becoming more valuable every day. The louder the world gets, the more people crave someone who actually listens. The more chaotic the world gets, the more people look for the person who is calm and focused. The social battery gauge to master your quiet power, you have to understand your energy. Think of yourself like a high-end smartphone. You have a beautiful screen and a powerful processor, but your battery is smaller than the cheap phones that don't do as much. If you leave every app running all day, notifications, loud music, bright lights, you will be dead by noon. Drains, these are things that pull energy out of you. Large crowds, surface level, small talk, bright lights, and being interrupted are common drains. Charges, these are things that put energy back in. Reading, one-on-one conversations, nature, silence, and working on a hobby you love are common charges. Mastering your power means learning to check your gauge throughout the day. If you know you have a big meeting at 3:00 p.m., you can't spend your lunch break in a crowded cafeteria talking about the weather. That is a drain. Instead, you might spend your lunch break walking alone or sitting in a quiet corner with a book. That is a charge. By the time the meeting starts, your gauge is back in the green. Charles Darwin did this perfectly. He knew that writing on the origin of species would take every ounce of his energy. So, he cut out the drains. He stopped going to the city. He stopped seeing people he didn't care about. He saved all his charge for the one thing that mattered. Many introverts feel guilty about this. We feel like we should want to go to the party. We feel like we are being mean if we don't want to chat in the break room. But imagine if Darwin had felt guilty. Imagine if he had forced himself to stay in London and go to every dinner party. He would have been a nice guy who was very popular for 3 years, and then he would have died having never written his book. The world would have lost one of its greatest discoveries because Darwin was too busy trying to be an extrovert. Your quiet time isn't a waste of time. It is the fuel for your power. The first step of the blueprint, the journey from being a social spectator to a connected communicator, starts with a single realization. You are not a lesser version of an extrovert. You are a different species of communicator entirely. Think back to Eleanor Roosevelt. When she finally accepted that she would never be the life of the party, something magical happened. She stopped worrying about her awkwardness and started focusing on the things she cared about: human rights, helping the poor, and making the world better. Because she wasn't trying to be charming, she became authentic. Because she wasn't trying to be loud, she became compelling. People realized that when Eleanor spoke, she wasn't just making noise. She was saying something that mattered. Mastering the quiet power is about moving from performance to purpose. When you are in a social situation, stop asking yourself, how do I look? Am I being funny enough? Do they like me? These are extrovert questions. They focus on the hit of social approval. Instead, ask yourself introvert questions. What can I learn here? What is this person actually trying to say? How can I add value to this conversation? These questions play to your strengths. They turn a social interaction into a puzzle to be solved or a story to be discovered. They take the pressure off you and put the focus on the connection. As you move through the rest of this book, we are going to build a blueprint for your specific style. We will learn how to break the ice without feeling fake. We will learn how to handle conflict without losing our cool. But none of it works if you don't first accept the Marie Sylvester lesson. You don't need to change who you are to be powerful. You just need to change how you use who you are. The world doesn't need more people who are shouting. It is already too loud. The world is waiting for the people who have been sitting in the back, watching and thinking. It is waiting for the people who know that a whisper, delivered at the right time, can be more powerful than a roar. Quiet is a choice, not a cage. Chapter 2, Why Does the Break Room Feel Lee? In the winter of 1842, a tall, thin man with a high-pitched voice stood backstage in a dusty hall in Springfield, Illinois. His hands were shaking. His boots were covered in dried mud from the unpaved roads, and his suit looked like it belonged to a much smaller man. He was supposed to walk out and speak to a room full of people who expected him to be a leader. Instead, he felt like a fraud. He looked at the back door. It would be so easy to slip out into the cold night and disappear. He felt the weight of every eye in the building, even though he hadn't even stepped onto the stage yet. He was certain that the moment he walked out, everyone would notice his messy hair, his awkward movements, and his country bumpkin accent. This man was Abraham Lincoln. History remembers him as a giant of courage, but in that moment, he was paralyzed. He was caught in a mental trap that almost cost him his career before it truly began. He was convinced that he was the center of a very judgmental universe. He felt like a bright spotlight was shining directly on his flaws, making them look 10 times bigger than they actually were. He almost walked out that back door. If he had, the history of the United States might look very different today. But at the last second, he took a breath and made a choice. He decided to stop thinking about his boots and start thinking about the people waiting for him. That feeling of being watched, judged, and found wanting is something most introverts know by heart. We call it social anxiety. But for many of us, it feels more like a physical weight. It's the reason the office break room feels less like a place to get coffee and more like a battlefield where you're missing your armor. We walk in, see a group of coworkers laughing, and our brain sends out a red alert. We think, are they laughing at me? Did I walk weirdly? Do I have something on my face? This is the spotlight effect in action. It is a trick of the mind that makes us believe we are the main character in everyone else's story, when in reality, everyone else is too busy worrying about their own muddy boots to notice ours. The invisible spotlight in 1999, a group of researchers led by Thomas Jelovich decided to test exactly how much people notice about us. They gathered a group of college students and told one student to put on a bright, slightly embarrassing t-shirt with a picture of singer Barry Manilow on it. The student was then told to walk into a room where other students were filling out paperwork. The student in the t-shirt was mortified. They were certain that at least half of the people in the room would notice the shirt and judge them for it. When the researchers later asked the people sitting in the room if they noticed the shirt, the results were shocking. Only about 20% had even seen it. The student felt like they were standing under a stadium spotlight, but to everyone else, they were just another person in the room. This is the core of the spotlight effect. We overestimate how much others notice our appearance and our mistakes. For an introvert, this effect is amplified. Because we spend so much time observing others, we assume others are observing us with the same intensity. We process information deeply, so we think everyone else is also deep processing, the way we stumbled over a word or the fact that we're standing alone by the snack table. Abraham Lincoln struggled with this constantly. He was a man of melancholy, what we might call depression or high-level anxiety today. He was deeply aware of his humble beginnings. He didn't come from a fancy family, and he didn't have a formal education. When he entered the world of politics, he felt like an outsider. He was terrified that the sophisticated people in Springfield would see right through him, but Lincoln found a way to turn the spotlight off. He realized that if he focused entirely on the message he wanted to deliver, the truth, as he saw it, he didn't have enough room in his brain to worry about his ill-fitting coat. He shifted his focus from self-protection to service. He realized that the people in that room weren't there to grade his fashion choices. They were there because they had problems of their own and were looking for a way forward. By turning his attention toward the needs of his listeners, he effectively stepped out of the spotlight. The anatomy of the dread when you walk into a social situation and feel that battlefield sensation, your body is reacting to a perceived threat. Even though a coworker asking, "How was your weekend?" isn't a lion trying to eat you, your brain's amygdala doesn't know the difference. It triggers the fight, flight, or freeze response. The freeze, your mind goes blank. You know you have things to say, but the files in your brain feel locked away. The flight, you look for the nearest exit. You might check your phone to look busy, or retreat to the bathroom just to have a moment of silence. The fight, this usually shows up as irritability or being overly defensive. You might give short, clipped answers because you want the interaction to end as fast as possible. Alara Vance knew these feelings well. One Tuesday morning, she stood outside the break room at her tech firm in Austin. Through the glass door, she could see Sarah, a new hire who seemed to have endless energy. Sarah was laughing and talking to the office manager. Alara's chest tightened. Her social battery was already at 40% because of a long morning of debugging code, and the idea of performing a conversation felt like climbing a mountain. She almost turned around. She almost decided that she didn't really need coffee and that water from the tap in the hallway would be fine. Her inner critic was already whispering.